Thank you for joining us this evening for this iteration of our Tuesday talk. My name is Imogen Hare, and I help oversee the Gazellio program at Gazelli Art House, which is our digital arm of the gallery. It's a pleasure to have you all here with us. Before we begin the talk, which I'll start with short introductions about the artists, I'll just tell you a little bit about the exhibition we have going on at the moment, which you can see around us. So the exhibition is titled Refactoring 1966 to 74 and is a solo exhibition exploring the transitional work from 1966 to 74 by represented artist Harold Cohen, coinciding with a major exhibition at the Whitney Museum of American Art, which is taking place until May this year. Following Gazelli Art House's seminal exhibition, the Aaron Retrospective, which took place in 2022, Refactoring 1966 to 74 investigates Harold Cohen's practice in the years preceding and inaugural to his creation of Aaron, the computer program designed to create art autonomously. So I'll start with short introductions, like I said. And beside me, we have Ira Greenberg, who has an eclectic background combining studio and applied arts and computer science. Ira has been a painter, 2D and 3D animator, print designer, web and interactive designer and developer, programmer, art director, creative director, managing director, art and computer science professor, author, and Web3 co-founder. And I would also like to note that Ira's work and collection, Cyberstructures, is available to collect. Well, we've launched the collection on our marketplace this evening, which you can access at nft.gazelle.io. And it's an amazing collection we have available online, and we also have works to view in our project space downstairs, which I will guide you all to after the talk. We have also works by Michael and Brendan's on show, so we'll give you some space to see their work not only on the screen but also in exhibition format. We also have Brendan Dawes with us this evening, who, demanding participation, Brendan's artistic practice harnesses time as medium in his explorations of the surrounding world. By means of code, data, and generative systems, Brendan's interest in human connection is revealed across electronic objects, screens, physical sculpture, and interactive installation. And finally, we have Michael Takeo Magruder, who is a visual artist who works with emerging media, including real-time data, digital archives, VR environments, mobile devices, and AI processes. His practice explores concepts ranging from media criticism and aesthetic journalism to digital formalism and computational aesthetics, deploying information-age technologies and systems to examine our network, media-rich world. So now I will kick us off with our first question of the evening about physicality in computer art. And I've chosen this question as we're surrounded by works by pioneering computer artist Harold Cohen, and all of which manifest as physical plotter pieces. So could you tell us about your practices and processes and the significance of physicality and materiality in your work as computational media-based artists, please?
Why are you looking at me?
Who's
going first? Shall we go this way, Lana? Yeah. So it's a strange one, the physical side, when you're working as a digital. Is this on? Yeah. Well, there's no speakers, is there? So yeah. It's a strange one when you're working as a digital artist, and when I used to be able to, when I was selling things in the old days, a few years ago, you had to transmute your digital work into like a physical form for galleries to be able to sell it. So it was always a print, which always was a bit bemusing to me. Because it's like, it's digital work, and particularly if it's generative work, then for me, generative means it has time embedded in it. Time is a kind of canvas for generative work. So a lot of generative work for me means that it should be real time, not always, but a lot of the time, I think, and that's what's interesting to me about it. So when physical things, having to turn it into an analog object, there's always a bit of tension there, I think. But I also love physical things. I like holding things in my hands. I don't have a Kindle. I read proper books because I think the experience is a lot nicer. I think when you hold something in your hand, you often become, it becomes more emotive and you become closer to it. So a lot of the stuff that I've done that's physical, like that thing, it's a machine that reacts to the physical space of the viewer in the gallery, and the work changes in real time based on the proximity to it. So I like that kind of what happens when a work is in a physical space and the context of that, and when someone sees that work and what can we play with from a media or digital point of view from that side. And I've done sculptures that are made from data and that kind of thing. But I think I'm not really, the whole metaverse thing is a bit, you ever been to the metaverse? It's shit. It's, I just don't, personally for me, until we make get rid of the headsets, and I'm not interested. But there is obviously some really interesting work in there. But I'm not completely sold on the metaverse for me personally. But I think I'm 57. What do I know? Kids these days, that's totally natural to them. So I have to remember that I'm often not the audience for these kind of things. But I think physical just allows for being able to take in the context of a physical space and how that can impact on your work.
Well, I guess I would pick up on some of those ideas that you mentioned, Brendan. My take on that is I've always been simultaneously interested in the physical and in the virtual stroke digital. And for myself, I've always looked to combine the two. And I think actually when I look back, that was quite an oddity some 20, 25 years ago. Yes, I did things that were screen-based, but it was because that was the only possibility. I always wanted to get things off the screen and into an experiential physical space. And for me, that just kind of made sense. I think, if you talk about metaverse, yes, I worked in early days of Second Life and Open Simulator, things like that. But if we think about virtual reality, I think about Roman fresco wall painting. I think about, notions of illusion and immersion. These things are concepts that have been with us through our analog histories. And the digital stroke virtual is just the current manifestation of that. So we work in these histories, in these lineages, and we're physical people, in terms of thinking about stuff that's real time. I think about performance. Performance is real time. Being in this space is real time. So why not actually combine the best of both worlds? That for me has always been an interest. I think about I'm an avid gamer. So, the game has no meaning unless it's actually filled with people in life. The idea of process, of materiality. I love music. The most precious things that I have in my collection are on vinyl. So it's about that kind of, we sit down. It's that process where we sit down, we have a glass of wine, we turn on the analog amp, we get out this vinyl record, we put it on, we have that experience together. So that's kind of always been my mindset. And I think, maybe that's something I've always tried to reflect in my work. Certainly the computational systems, they bring new possibilities to us as artists, but fundamentally it's no different than other new media of older times. Technology is basically a way to allow us to realize ideas. but it doesn't kind of separate us from that history of materiality. So I've always tried to keep that in my work just because it's kind of what I'm into.
What was the original question? So it's very possible that I'm just a painter with a terribly short attention span. I come from painting. That was my first love. I think it probably still is my first love and my current love. I was extremely fascinated with computing in spite of not wanting to be and thinking that I was sort of cheating on my painting. And then it just kind of took over for a couple decades. And I've actually tried to kind of recover and go back to drawing and painting. And then once again, I slip back into the digital thing. So I'm sort of stuck. And I don't feel like I've had as graceful an integration as both Brendan and Michael were describing. For me, there was always these kind of bifurcated paths that were kind of going side by side, and one would inform the other. But I think because I'm a bit of my training, my age being similar to Brendan's, that a little bit older, but there's a kind of a maximalist perspective with painting. It was very hard for me to sort of kind of step away from that temple and kind of do this other thing and then put it in context with this rich history that I was really involved in. I do think it's sort of getting better, or I'm just losing my will to fight it as much anymore. But when I first started coding, my sort of internal mantra was I wanted to find how to code could drip. I was desperate for materiality, and that's I spent literally 2 decades trying to find materiality in computation. And when I did eventually kind of make forays back into physical work, I realized that had been changed by this process. And now I was sort of looking for algorithms or embodied algorithms sort of in the drawing and painting process, a kind of automatic process. So it's been a really interesting sort of experience doing these kind of parallel things that are sort of slowly merging. But yeah, materiality and physical presence is critical for me. Though I don't think I've integrated it as elegantly as both of you have yet.
So that takes me to my next question about advancements. Do we need this?
Is this a prop?
It's a prop, yes.
Or is it for the recording?
But it seems so authoritative.
Yeah. Pass the mic.
It's pretty, but thank you for using it. Yeah, so advancements in technology. As Brendan, you were talking about the metaverse, and both of you as kind of technology as a medium. I'm wondering about how you navigate all these technological advancements that happen day to day, and how you stay informed about emerging technologies, but also about how you envision the future of art evolving, in response to these technological advancements. It may just be that they're linear, but do you have any other?
Should we go this way?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Just mix it.
So I don't worry about staying up to date or keeping up. I just worry about what's fascinating, and then so it's a pretty much a hedonistic type of approach. Like if something intrigues me, then I'm going to study it, even if it sidetracks me or just kind of disrupts what I'm doing. And I think a lot about the difference between sort of facility and sort of kind of fluency or literacy, where I teach a lot. I've been doing that to make most of my living over the years. And so I think about that with students, where as technology, they were true digital natives, right? I'm at best a digital immigrant. They became extremely facile with these tools. But I also noticed there wasn't always core literacy with the tools, right? And some of them could actually code extremely quickly and not really understand the structure or the design of the program they were writing, yet they could do it much faster than I could. So I think a lot about that in terms of where's the fuzz and the twinkly stuff, and where's the core stuff in the technology. With all this AI, 99% of it is just eye candy on top of very simple, the same basic principles underneath of the core. And everybody's trying to get in the marketplace and make money on it. So I think being able to see that, and this is an argument I would make going back to the physicality question, where if one learns to do this now, if you don't get that sense of literacy the history, it's hard to sometimes, and I think for the public especially, to really separate sort of where's the real stuff and where's sort of the dressing, the decoration.
Mm. Yeah. Well, going down the line, I absolutely agree with that. And I think literacy really is the key for myself. I actually have no arts education at all. My arts education was skipping school and going to the Smithsonian and hanging out in the Hirshhorn or, the
There had been some pot smoking.
oh, yeah. No, honestly, I was most interested in the art. But no, my background's like hardcore science and tech and math and I think about like the early days where the first computer that I built myself was in the 386 days. And I've always built my computers. But then back then, I could know quite a bit about technology. So I had the literacy. Now, my main challenge is staying literate in a world where computational technology and the sort of derivatives of that, it's an exponential sort of like learning curve. So whereas in my early days, I absolutely was an expert in certain areas, now my challenge is to stay knowledgeable and literate, to use your words, about the areas so that I'm interested in with technology, so I can ask specialists to do something that's, because everything has its bounds, right? So you can't, just all of a sudden ask something that's unreasonable technology, that just doesn't fly. But you need the literacy to say, okay, if I'm going to work in this space, I'm going to collaborate with people in this space, what is reasonable to ask? So that's my main challenge now. And that's certainly different from back sort of when I was growing up, where really you could have like a high level of specialist knowledge about things. That certainly presents some challenges. But for me, I like to look at the positive side and think about the opportunities, because as long as I can remain literate with technology, then I can actually seek out and have meaningful collaborations with people to push things further. Myself coming from an artistic standpoint, but then sort of working with scientists and technologists, and finding those kind of common grounds to do things that really haven't been possible before. That's kind of what keeps me going. So, yeah. How about yourself, Gregory?
Well, I'm always reminded of that LCD sound system, Losing My Edge, where he says, I'm losing my edge to the kids coming up from behind, So, but I'm not really I'm not like on TechCrunch every day going, wow, this is good. Because it's so overwhelming that you wouldn't do anything, because you're like, well, I might as well just stop, because there's no way I can learn all this stuff. Mm-hmm. I always come back to, it's about concepts and ideas, and then I seek out the technology I need to use to make that happen. Mm-hmm. I want to do things I don't know how to do. Mm-hmm. I'm interested in I describe it as, there's the things I know, and then outside that circle is all the things I don't know, which is huge. But where the interesting stuff is that event horizon of between the things I do know and the things I don't know. Mm-hmm. That edge there, where it's like, I'm not quite sure what I'm doing here. That's interesting to me. And it just so happens that in the way I manifest that is through technology. And I go, oh, there's this thing called AI. Let's have a look at that. But it always comes down to me to a conceptual thing. I always remind people, I think, sometimes obsess about complexity. Joshua Davidson, I don't know. People obsess about complexity. And I think I was always reminded of this thing. I'd done this work at Design Week, or this design thing in London. And it was a printer that was connected to the internet that I called the Happiness Machine. And it went out on the internet and it found people talking about happiness. And you press the button and it printed a receipt of happiness, right? That was it. And it was just random strangers talking about happy things. And it gave you a tiny little receipt, and it was tiny, so it made it more intimate, right? If it was an A4 sheet of paper, it'd be like, who cares? I've made a fax machine. So, but I always remember this guy came up to me when I was there, and he said, well, what you've made is really simple. Like that was supposed to be like a dagger in my heart. I'm like, oh my God, mate, yeah, I'm an idiot. You know, it's like, and he didn't understand that people weren't looking at that and engaging with it in a really great way. They weren't thinking, I wonder how it connects this to Wi-Fi. And they're not thinking about any of that. They're connecting with the concept and the story. And I think that's what we have to come back to. It doesn't matter about, all this new technology coming out every day. You've got to think about what is the story you're trying to tell, and do I need new technologies for it, or do I need old things? So I'm sure we're still all using, old stuff, because that's kind of, there's a comfort in that, but...
Right tool for the right job.
The right tool for the right job, and I think a lot of us, we're combining tools. We're not just like, using one tool. There's lots of different things. We're working on the command line and all kinds of stuff. So that's what it comes down to me. I'm not really interested in technology as such. I find it, I'm just not, it kind of stumbles across me, or I might go deep into one particular area because I've suddenly found it, interesting. But I'm not there like on TechCrunch every day, well, I'm never there, so I just don't care. So I think for anyone who's finds it all quite overwhelming, just switch it off, because it's a giant hose pipe that you cannot control, and just forget about it and just try and concentrate on your own ideas.
Thank you. So Brendan, thinking about the happiness machine, question for everyone, but just because you just brought it up, and interactivity in your work. We've also spoken a bit about collaboration, which I want to get back to a bit more afterwards, but interactivity and collaboration, do you see those interacting with your work in a physical way as collaborators in a sense, or do you see them as just viewers? And Michael actually said something earlier, sorry not to quote directly, but
it's fine.
That games, like video games, have no meaning without players, and so do you see that a similar way with your work?
Yeah, I think for me, they complete the work. Well, is the work ever complete? No. But they are part of the story and the process. I don't think the work is, finished until someone sees that work. I mean, we can get into existential things that, does the art exist if no one actually sees it? Probably not. If a tree falls down for it. So, all those kind of things, which I really like. So, and particularly if it's an interactive work, I'm always surprised by people. I think a cynical Englishman from the north, I have to step back and go, people do surprise you. I did this with the happiness machine. What's amazing with that project was people connect with it because it's talking about universalities. I did this exhibition with it in Germany, and we were setting up, and it was a small little gallery, and setting up in the window there, and it was raining outside, and we still hadn't set it up, but we were pinning up all the little happiness receipts that it spewed out. And these three lovely older women appeared in the street, they had their umbrellas up, and they were, German, and all this stuff is in English. And they were there for like 20 minutes in the pouring rain, reading everything. And I took a picture of it, and I use this in talks now. And I was like, wow, again, they're not interested in technology, what they were connecting with. They were fascinated by the stories. And they're German, and they were reading it in English. But because this universal theme of happiness, or there was something intriguing about it. And so that to me was interactive. They weren't like reaching through the window or pressing anything, it didn't matter. But emotionally they were interacting with it. And that for me kind of completed the work. So it's really important for me. I think it's you know, if you have work that just sits on your hard drive or in the cloud, wherever that is, if it just sits there and you're the only one viewing it, I think it's only half done. You know, it's until someone sees it, then, you know, it doesn't really, I'm not sure how much it means, to be honest. But yeah, that's my thought.
Well,
Destroy me now, Michael.
no,
Right.
no,
Happiness.
I'll,
Damn happiness.
I'll agree and maybe add a few points.
Cool.
So yes, I'm still a gamer. I still run with the kids. I still shoot things up. I still hone my own. But again, for me, it comes back to this idea of a living space. And, you know, okay, so philosophically, I just think that we're all just a summation of our genes and our experiences. So we're kind of machines. We're biological machines in our own way. And what is interesting to me about the living system, the things in real time, the combination between the virtual and the physical, both real-time things, is just that, you know, computing prediction at this point in time can't foresee the outcome, you know? So we have these happy moments of things like, oh my God, that's really beautiful, or that's really terrible. You know, that's what we actually get from being in the live system. You know, I certainly agree that there's no point, or I don't see any point producing a work and not releasing it, because it's that feedback loop. It's the way that people will not only receive the work, but what they'll do with it. That gives the work life, you know, and vitality beyond the things that I've conceived it.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's for all of us, right? You know, we're artists. We call ourselves artists. We put ourselves in this position. We make things, like for myself, that I think are interesting entry points for people to have an experience. But what that experience will be is not for me to predetermine. You know, that will just happen organically. And then sort of getting that feedback loop and then running with it, that kind of keeps me going.
Yeah.
It keeps it fresh.
And they often surprise you with what they
Yeah,
think about it or bring to
absolutely.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm going to bring like a first principles perspective on this, going back to painting for a second. It's funny, I just did a post on X this last night, middle of the night on this. And so I taught drawing and painting for a long time before coding. And for me, it was always, you know, why do we waste our time sitting there learning how to render something? What is it just the sort of the magic trick part of it, the skill, so that it looks impressive that somebody can do that? And for me, it started becoming about, you know, and this was through really good instruction, a couple of interesting professors. It was sort of about reverse engineering the perceptual system, right? So that if you can learn to turn the brain off and record the data that's right on the surface of people's retina, and you can record that on a two-dimensional surface, when they look at the piece, they potentially could engage with the piece as if they were looking at something in the three-dimensional world. So there's like an automatic interaction between the viewer and a really strong piece of work that's even a painting or a drawing. And we talked a lot about in drawing and painting, we talk about really making the painting move. Like you don't want to create this static thing, right? You want to keep this thing that ideally is just constantly moving. So then if I try to look at corollaries in coding and AI, my brain just explodes, right? Because it's just, I haven't figured that part out yet. And so for me, what they were talking about is, for me, what happens like in AI when I'm working with the system, that this sense of discovery, and this happened to some degree with coding. And again, this is I'm really talking more about myself, but when I'm looking at interactive work and I'm using stratified randomization through my program, there's some sense of surprise. And I'm looking for those edge cases, and those are things that get me the most excited, right? I'm hoping other people have that transformative experience when they can somehow see that without necessarily having been making the piece. But with AI, it's taken it to a different level where there's actually true surprise, right? So when I'm prompting and I'm iterating through the prompting, I'm sometimes shocked in terms of what I'm experiencing still. Now, maybe in 5 years it won't, but at this point still, it brings me a little bit closer to what happened with that idea of the drawing and painting and learning to kind of see without sort of the brain intervening. But again, this is pretty solipsistic. I'm not dealing with the viewer here. This is my own experience of interactivity.
Amazing, thank you. Do you have
Can
anything to add?
I actually respond to that? Yeah. Yeah, I see your point, Ira, but then I also, the first thing that comes into my mind is that the green I see is not the green that you see. So there are always going to be those inherent differences in receiving a work of art that are based on the individual, both from their biomechanical self, i.e. their organic computing infrastructure, but also their experiences, because we only receive something through that prism of what we've lived. In terms of the AI and the complexity of that, one of the things that interests me is that it is still kind of, the human is still there because of the sampling, but then it's this kind of like black box amalgamation and well, you could arguably say kind of like lowest common denominator of like all those kind of things coming together from various individuals. So that's what I'm trying to kind of think about these days with AI, how it basically has sampled the system. But unlike so much other stuff in science and computing, which is actually purposefully transparent, AI is not. It is the black box. So, that's something that kind of plays on my mind. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts about, from a painterly perspective, how you thought about.
Yeah, what I find surprising with the AI, and again, we've only all been doing it a relatively short period of time, but there's an intuition to the experience of prompting that corresponds somewhat with this idea of, the painting and drawing process. To some degree with coding, I've talked, there is sort of an intuitive flow to coding to some degree. But once you get to a certain level of complexity, it's more difficult unless you've built tons of subsystems and systems to kind of help you facilitate that.
Yeah.
But with the AI, there is a kind of conjuring that is kind of not rational sometimes. And I'm always kind of amazed at where it can sometimes go. Like sometimes you'll start and think, I'm never going to get to here, and then you just keep iterating and pushing, and again, it's almost physical, and then it just gets somewhere.
The things I'm interested in are imperfection and inefficiency. And it seems to me that AI is the opposite of that a lot of the time. Particularly, the really like slick stuff that is like, you look at it and go, wow, how did they even make that? It's amazing. There are no imperfections in a lot of these things. I'm not talking about when there's like 6 fingers. I love all that stuff. I think that's like, an interesting aesthetic. I'm here for that. I'm not here for like, no, we fixed it. It's 5 fingers. Like, oh, it's crap. Who cares? I don't want to make photorealistic stuff because I've got a camera. So for me, a lot of the AI stuff it seems to be making us want to make us more efficient and also things more perfect. And I don't think that that's where the beauty is. I've got a thing that I've saved on my phone from John Ruskin, but I'll read it out later, but it's about beauty and imperfection. But so that's where the interesting thing for me with AI is the more kind of weird stuff. That's what I like. I'm not interested in trying to create a photorealistic world, even though the technology is incredible. We've all seen the Sora videos and things like that. But I think as us, and Josh Davis sat there in the audience, we've been exploring using AI and all those kind of things, and it's we're interested in, and as Josh said to me, he said, it's really, and I might misquote you here, Josh, but it's really hard to make abstract the kind of work that we make. It's actually quite hard to make AI make that. It's really easy to make it go, put a woolly hat on a dog, and sell it for $4 million as the other day. Those kind of things. It's much harder to do the abstract stuff, I think, or the abstract stuff in a certain style, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm totally agreeing with you.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd love to go where we were talking, just going back to code. I mean, I don't think any of us would have been coding if we didn't want that state.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Because shrink wraps, Photoshop was efficient.
Yeah.
Just use it, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think in the way we probably all use codes and stuff, I don't know, but it comes down to surprises again. We want to be surprised by the system, I think. Or maybe I don't know, Michael. Do you want to be surprised by it, or are you like?
No, I'm pretty analytical.
Yeah.
But I'd also say that I'm a script kiddie at best.
Right.
Okay. In science and tech, I know some people that are proper computer scientists. So it's a different world.
Yeah.
Also with different intentions for their work. And I think that's important to draw the distinction. I certainly align to your idea of imperfection. The Japanese half of me, loves that. That is the beauty. Well, it's also it comes back to the notion of unique. The moment, the experience, the thing that isn't easily or ever reproducible.
Yeah.
It's the beauty of that kind of imperfection, or the sort of illusion of imperfection. That would be a more sort of a meta question. But yeah, it's I certainly agree with a lot of what you're saying.
Can I ask you a question, Michael? So I think what Brendan was getting at for me is this idea of chaotic materiality in computation, which happens naturally with physical materials, right? Paint drips. You either get pissed off, stop painting, or just learn to roll with it, right? Code, that's the idea of this code dripping, right? So would you prefer to work with chaotic systems, or would you rather have systems that are really controlled and you bring the chaos to your process?
Well, it depends on, what I'm trying to artistically explore and what I want the outcome to be. But I think, all systems on some level, there's the difference between, and again, it kind of gets to this meta level where does true randomness exist? If it does, how do we actually achieve that integrated? Or is just the system so complex that, it is a deterministic system, but we don't actually have the math, for lack of a better phrase, to understand what's going on and to come to the right conclusion of how this process is going to unfold. So it's the semblance of randomness, but it actually isn't random. For me, it's what I want is not really to look at things on that kind of like math or random not random level. It actually has no importance to me. What I'm most interested in terms of building an experience is building something that's relevant, and particularly socially relevant, something that's interesting. I think one of the things with technology, certainly as I'll be 50 next month. So, I'm kind of like first generation digital native. Technology has allowed for an amplification and a distribution of agency. And it really has changed a lot, so much in our society. And for me, the work that I'm interested in producing is stuff that actually opens up the black box, right? It actually gives people a way to kind of start to understand the kind of things that people like us just naturally live. That we're kind of in this weird kind of position of privilege, to be quite honest. And that's now that so much of society, is based on this. It's actually, how can I produce something that allows people, that little bit of insight to understand, the beauties and also the sort of the potential pitfalls of something. That's what I kind of see myself increasingly drawn to.
You make me feel like a worse person.
So, moving in a slightly different direction now, I was wondering, with the rise of popularity of generative platforms such as art blocks and the broadening access of AI systems such as ChatGPT and DALL-E, different mediums and systems used to create digital art have become more comprehensible to a wider audience. And with this in mind, I was wondering if you would like to discuss the positive aspects, but also the downfalls or shortcomings of such growth in the new media art space specifically.
Now we get to be broke here.
Yeah. Now we can be proper
Softball.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's the same as everyone can take pictures on their phone, but it doesn't mean they're great, photographers. Just because everyone, can use Midjourney or DALL-E or whatever, it doesn't mean they're going to make great art. I think that's a young person ringing in saying, "Shut up." So yeah, it's I don't know. There's this whole democratization of art and stuff like that, and I
Is it outside?
Yeah, I like, it's great that people have access to these tools, including myself, but it means there's a lot of noise out there, and a lot of awful work, so it makes it harder. Well, on a commercial level, it makes it harder if you're a designer on that side of things. Even now agencies are like, well, why would I pay someone to do that when I can just go, press a button and it makes exactly what I want. Without a doubt, Netflix, there will be a Netflix series that will be made by pressing a button, and the next Squid Game could be all made with AI. That is going to happen. That is absolutely going to happen, because people like Netflix, companies like Netflix, need to, cut costs. There's only so many subscribers in the world, so they have to find a way to make things more profitable. And the way to do that is the coming AI video thing, whatever. That is definitely going to happen. Whether it's going to be any good, I don't know. But so you've got all that aspect of it. I think for me, I don't really worry about it too much. What it does do, you get these crazy messages on Instagram from agencies who think you're some 16-year-old kid, and they want to pay you £50 or not even pay you to because it's good publicity. It's
Exposure.
Yeah, exposure. Yeah, I've just gone and paid my mortgage with some exposure. Yeah. So you get a lot of those things, and they're just kind of throwaway. I don't know. I mean, I don't really, think about it too much. Yeah, go on, Michael. You can probably answer it better than me, Michael.
Well, I don't know about that, but first of all, I'd say things with AI can remix and retread where we've been, but the issue is about real innovation. So whether it's producing a logo, making a show, writing a song, doing something visual, it can remix. It can remix really well. It can give a client what they think they want, But what about the things of like that they didn't expect? You think about like the great kind of transformative sort of leaps that we've had, which are really, honestly, by definition, they're off-piste. So how do you get off-piste with AI when it's all about remixing in a very kind of dumb, fine, it's like brute force from a computational standpoint, but it's pretty dumb, in many ways. That might change. So my thoughts on this, might not be correct in 5 years' time. But for now, it's kind of like the problem that I see with AI is that it is replacing a lot of the entry-level stuff. And in creative practice, that kind of like entry-level stuff is what often supports people as they're kind of moving up through the ranks. So I delivered a lecture at the Flynn Institute of Arts a few months ago. And one of the things that I said at the after lecture dinner to the donors in the crowd, I just said, well, please keep supporting actual people from the creative industries, young people doing their thing. Because if you don't do that, then you're replacing that from automated systems, AI, whatever. You're basically stopping the innovation. And right now, AI can't do the innovation. It remixes, it rehashes, so that's kind of this, I think, this problematic inflection point we're at. It's a very powerful tool. It allows us computationally to do things that absolutely haven't been possible before. But if we allow it to just kind of like pervade society without sort of any kind of thought or regulation for the sake of getting like, economies of scale, then it's going to be an issue. Not for us, because we'll
be dead. No. Well, we're talking in a few years.
Yeah. I mean,
we're still alive,
because the artists that are at a certain level today, it's not going to affect them. Fine.
Yeah.
But it's like, the young generations coming up.
Mm-hmm.
You think about the kind of stuff that one did to kind of, make a living, to get the resourcing to then further your ideas, your practice. That's what it's going to undercut. That's the danger I see right now.
I'll just be quick, but I generally feel that if more people in the world are making art or being creative, the world will be a better place. That's basically how I feel. I think what quickly happens, though, is people discover Midjourney or DALL-E or Stable Diffusion, whatever, and they realize that it's actually not that easy to make art. Like, they can quickly get these results, and then they start getting bored and then they want to go a little deeper, and then I get students asking me, how do you get so much detail in your work, right? I said, well, I spent 8 hours yesterday on this little passage of detail. So I don't really find it. I make more art now, but I don't think the process has gotten any easier for me to make really solid work. I can make more of it now. There's no doubt about that. But I do see more people. I think there's another part to this question too, which is the communities that are forming now around Web3. And I see these as being the healthiest arts communities I've seen in my career because they're really inclusive. And there's a lot less judgment about this is the way one makes a piece of art. Like when I went to school, you just didn't ask certain questions and you'd be dismissed, right? Like, how am I going to pay the bills, right? Or even, outside of a narrow aesthetic. So I feel like it's gotten much better in that sense. Your generation.
Absolutely. From our not to answer my own question, but from our perspective as a gallery, at least, the popular culture of AI and how it's been integrated into our lives actually, I think, has made it easier for us to sell and present digital work. People understand the work better, and they are interested in it because they've heard about it. It doesn't seem like something so scary anymore. I think that kind of like secret complexity that perhaps was around before this kind of development and accessibility around AI made people not even know what questions to ask about how it was made. Now they can ask, oh, is it text-based? Did the artists use their own data sets? And these are more questions that at least I am getting from a more general audience about digital work, which I wasn't receiving before. So I think there's some positives as well in that sense.
Well, that throws up an interesting thing for me. I was recently rereading, this is kind of maybe really old, but the Process book by Tomato, who some of you will know Tomato, of course, as Amazing Design Group. And this was from 1996. And in the back of that book, it was a little quote from them, and it said, we're talking about the creative process, but at the end of it, they didn't want to talk about how things were made on a computer, because they said no one asks the painter what type of paintbrush they use, right? And I thought, that was interesting. Now, I think things have changed, and now, because I put that on, shared on a few social media things, and people are like, yeah, I used to think that, but now I think people do want to know what the paintbrush is. Now, does that make the work, do you resonate with the work better because you know like the data sets, does that mean it's like you're connecting with the work? Or, that's the confusing thing for me. It's like, because people say, well, the first thing they go, and this is frustrating when you're working with digital things, the first thing they say often is, how did you make that? It's like, just enjoy the work. Just, you don't have to understand it. You don't have to know how it's made. Now, I know for some people who make that kind of work, that is interesting, right? But I feel sometimes we're kind of obsessed with, because it's digital, we're then asking, how it's made for some reason. But when you see a painting, you don't go, what kind of paint was that? Or,
is the question passive aggressive for you? It's really the subtext, like it's bullshit because you cheated.
That's it. I think that's it. I think I do find it kind of passive aggressive, because what they're saying is, it's that guy again. It's really simple. It's like, he haunts me. It's really simple to make. The suggestion, I think this is the interesting with computer-based work. Because it's a computer, the suggestion is, by some, that it's easier. You're not putting in
not putting the hours, just the art button.
Exactly. You're not in a Turner level, like, all that skill to do that thing. So therefore, it's not as good because you haven't spent 5 years making that painting. So that's a whole other discussion, I guess, where, these days, literally, you can go, bong, 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 that's 10 grand, thanks. It's like, but as I was saying before, I've just done this film about Brian Eno that's different every time it's watched, which will be at the Barbican on April 20th. But there's a thing in there where Brian Eno says, when he was doing stuff with synthesizers back in the 70s, he loved it because no one could tell him that he was doing it wrong, because there was no rules. But he also substituted, and this was in his words, he substituted skill for judgment. That's how he thought, because he was twiddling knobs, and he said, there's no skill in twiddling knobs on a synthesizer. And he was using the world of judgment rather than the world of skill. And I realized, well, God, that kind of describes, what I think a lot of us do, and, because he was then, at that time, people were still going, yeah, but you can't play a guitar like a virtuoso. You're just going like that, So I don't think it's really changed that much. But I find these, it's kind of interesting how we perceive digital work.
Sorry, just going back to the paint analogy, do you not think that when paints were kind of innovative, different paints were created, acrylic versus oil, you don't think that people were wondering what type of paint that was? Why does it look so different to the
because I certainly still
tech is new.
That's why it's an interesting conversation.
Paint was new at one point as well, right?
Yeah, vermilion and things like that. Suddenly it was like there were certain colours that you couldn't get, and then they became available. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. It's all technology. Yeah. It doesn't matter what form it's in. in all technology, like everything, it has its limitations. What I find most interesting is when people think that things that are digital or virtual have no limitations, like it's some amorphous free-for-all. It's like, no, they just, every system, by definition of being a system, has bounds, but the bounds are different. So, yeah, but the conceptual sort of issue is the same. So, yeah. It's that's what's interesting to me in terms of perception of digital virtual.
My gateway transition from painting to code was moving from oil to acrylic.
Amazing. I have one last question for you all, and then I'd like to open it up to Q&A with the audience. When I originally invited you all to speak, it was based on all of your works having mappings in as a theme. And you all told me very quickly that was a terrible reason to pick three artists.
I don't think I ever said that.
But that's fine. No offense taken.
That's not true.
We were more passive aggressive.
I wasn't aggressive at all. I actually really like the idea of expanding the notion of mapping.
Yes, so that being said, could you please tell us about your individual methodologies and applications of mappings and all of its extended notions, before we also invite people to go downstairs, which shows this in your work as well, so keep that in mind if you want to talk about specific works.
Well, I won't talk about specific works, but I'll certainly address the sort of the thing about mapping. I do see the connection in mapping in all three of our works. For me, that is a socially interesting and also important context, because it's, this idea of mapping in the digital age has certainly taken on an expanded sort of definition. 100 years ago, mapping was a very straightforward process. It was actually about location, descriptive locations of place in the physical world, where now we think about mapping in terms of relationships, so again, it comes back to my interests in context. Everything is context specific. And with digital technologies, virtual technologies, it allows us to, in an in-dimensional space, to map out and to showcase and to explore these contexts. So the work that I think that all three of us do addresses that in different ways. That it's not a visualization for visualization's sake, but it's actually mapping out context and posing questions. So I certainly wouldn't want to focus on mapping in the traditional sense, but in the kind of like current digital virtual context, I think mapping is a very important thing that has changed in the present day. So I'm happy with that.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, listen, I'm happy with mappings. It's just I probably don't think of it as mappings. And then now when you speak about it, I realise that probably everything I do is mapping of some kind, right? So I think down in the project space is this work, the Cinema Redux thing, which is one of the first digital works I did back in 2003. And it's a mapping in as much as, at the time I took DVD information and took 1 minute of film and laid out 1 second of a film in tiny thumbnails. So each row of the image is 1 minute of film. And I just did that, it took like half an hour to write that code, I was just playing around. And when I did that and then put it on this wonderful thing called the World Wide Web, people, again, resonated with it in a way that I didn't know they would. I just thought, well, it's just a thing I'm playing around with. But what was interesting for me was someone pointed out that it was like data visualization where I hadn't abstracted the data at all. The thing that you saw was the data. And I thought, oh yeah, I guess that is kind of unusual back then, because I wasn't turning it into colours or anything like that. They were just the frames of the movie, but you see the whole movie in front of you, and then it alters how you maybe speak about a movie or talk about it or whatever. So that for me was a mapping of 24 frames a second. Take that mapping and map it in a different way, so it's like one row, one minute of film time per row. So that for me is a mapping. But I guess I've never thought about it in that way, because of maps. You think of like maps, but obviously, But now when you talk about it, I realise that probably that's everything I do is that. Yeah.
I felt similar listening to Michael, because what I was thinking about was, Cézanne's, especially when he's painting out Mount Ventoux, that's a mapping of his perceptual experience, and trying to understand the data. And I always thought of data when I was a painter, even though I wasn't really aware I was thinking of data. But I was obsessed with Cézanne. And then I also think just creative practice is a type of mapping, right? Trying to find a sense of self through the practice.
Yeah.
So thanks, Michael.
Yes,
Mike, you can call.
But now, it's like now, because of the digital virtual, we think of it differently.
Yeah.
And I think that's also some of the, that's the importance of why we do what we do, because it's that ability to look back through history, right? And to kind of recontextualize or reinterrogate the things that have come before. Now we explicitly think about mapping as this expanded experience. And they did it back then, but they were still working with them. So, yeah.
Thank you very much, all three of you. I will open up to Q&As now, and I will be handing the mic over to you. It will not broadcast your voice, but it's to get your question on the recording for the video. So if you can speak into it. So I'll walk around to you, starting with William.
Very interesting panel. I've got a question for Ira. So you talked about the Web3 crowd, and can you talk about the inextricable relationship between generative AI art and Twitter? You have a ton of followers, enviable number of followers. So it's a great community, but Twitter seems to be so closely interwoven. I just wondered what your thoughts were, positive and negative.
Yeah,
that.
Positive and negative, but we've tried to get off Twitter a number of times. So as new systems, like networks have formed, a bunch of us have moved over and tried it, and then it just was hard to get critical mass, and then we're now multiple posting, or I think it's really the NFT space and then it supported the marketplaces in a way to kind of promote the work that also I think Twitter became really effective. It's one of those things, like, I think many of us are not super happy with this system, but in terms of that we're all on there, but we don't really have another way of being able to communicate as a community when we're literally spread all over the world. It's a good question though. What's the new one? The frame
Threads?
Not threads, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That offers some promise because it's integration with the blockchain. You could theoretically do drops and mint right off of Esther, but see.
Hi, thank you for this amazing talk. I had a question about whether, as new media artists, and especially when using artificial intelligence, whether you find there to be a certain difficulty when integrating like personal experiences in the work. I know, like Brendan, for example, you do this quite a lot in your pieces, but whether Ira and Michael, in your work, you find that there's still only so far you can go in terms of integrating kind of like real life examples and things like that.
Oh, I can answer that quickly. Yeah, I really hate the whole sort of prompt engineering thing. So my work in AI over the last few years, I see it just as another tool. And the things that I do with AI are explicitly things that can't occur without myself as the artist involved. So it is truly a dialogue, reciprocal experience that without both halves, the final product doesn't exist. That's really, for me, the only thing that I'm interested in. I was fortunate to actually be close colleagues with some of the sort of the leading pioneers in the digital humanities scene. Harold Short, Willard McCarthy, both eminent professors here in London at King's College. And one of the things that they really instilled in me when I was younger was this idea of the craft of computing. And in that computing, especially in like something like the humanities is actually the core of that. So, you know, this idea of the system, i.e. the AI or the technology or whatever, just being the producer of the art, for me has always been a non-starter. You know, the iPod on the plinth is not a piece of artwork. It's just a piece of technology. Maybe it's sort of design at best, but it's not a creative thing. So my response to AI has always been, okay, what can AI allow me to explore that I haven't been able to before? What new affordances does it provide? But at the same time, what can I as an artist bring to this conversation that the AI can't do on its own? So, yeah, that's my particular take on this area.
For me, the AI is the gap between coding, for like creative coding and painting for me. That's why I think it was such a aha moment for me, because in generative coding, you know, it's very mathematical, it's very geometric, it's very non-objective. But if in terms of dealing with figuration or representation, it was always extremely difficult to do that in kind of a fluid way. The AI allows that to happen. And then, you know, there are AI systems where you can actually integrate code and image together. I'm also I'm probably more of a formalist, I would think, certainly than Michael. And so these kind of, you know, I almost always wanted to not really be present in the work in a kind of very conscious way. I wanted like these first principles of formal properties to kind of emerge out of this experience with materials. And I still sort of bring that bias to coding and AI.
So me, I'm more with Michael in that I like to be present in the work, and you know, I'm trying to tell stories about that interest me, or you know, and that's important for me. I have to be embedded in the work. So that for me is the same thing. I can't just like make something in AI that, you know, but I'm just pressing a button and it, you know, it's got nothing to. I've not inputted it in any way. I think I can't do that for myself. I have to have my experiences or my aesthetic likes and dislikes, etc., etc. So it's, but I don't really use AI in that way. It's often part of another part of the process that, you know, I've done, and maybe it's a mix. So I'm not really big into the whole prompt thing. But you know, I think there's obviously people who are really skilled in that, and you know, that can be a skill as well. But yeah, I think just for me personally, I have to bring myself into the work. Yeah.
Hi guys.
Yeah.
Thanks. It's been really informative. Like, great. It's been great. I've got a couple of questions. I'm going to be cheeky. That's all right. Yeah. All right. Fine. Yeah. First of all, this is to all three of you, but specifically Ira, right? So a lot of, I guess, the exposure of people to these technologies and to digital art, particularly like VR, spatial art, has come through like marketing and brand experiences. Like that's the way that a lot of it has come to the fore, and a lot of that technology and development has been done. Do you feel as though working with clients in those kind of areas, you have to describe your concepts differently to when you're presenting to the art world or presenting to potential collectors of the art? And second question is, as much as you were discussing the fact that you think, people knowing the process somehow cheapens it, do you feel like amongst your peers and amongst people who are more serious about this kind of artworks, they have a greater appreciation knowing the techniques that you've done, have an actual greater appreciation of what you've achieved?
Yeah. The first one about so I honestly don't work with clients per se so much anymore, but I guess we could put it in the context of a gallery. And so just maybe rephrase the core of that question, the first part.
I guess, how does it differ, expressing a concept, how you describe that concept to a commercial audience rather than to an artistic audience?
Okay, commercial first.
I've got to work.
I don't really exist out of that world anymore. So
Right.
that's the thing.
Well, I mean, when you consider thinking back, like, is it massively different, or?
I mean, the reason that I didn't stay in industry, because I worked as a designer, is that most of the conversations and the day-to-day was just not interesting, because these conversations we're having in here didn't happen at all. That was unfortunate for me.
I've experienced, both sides. I used to have a design agency where we worked for massive brands, Diesel, Kellogg's, Coca-Cola. The most depressing meeting I've ever been in was with Coca-Cola, and I just wanted them all to die. They were just horrible people, and I hope that's being filmed. Yeah. So, but I find there's a tendency like clients are the enemy when you're in that world, and it's not the case. I was, despite what I've just said, I always think that all you need is one good client who, in that organization, one good person, brand manager, whatever it is, who wants to make great work and wants you to succeed and has faith in you, because the difference is, they might be, and it's happened to me many times where I did some work for EE back in the day, and it was like I made these data visualizations that we toured around the country. And I remember the original meeting, they were like, we want it to be really different, and to be unique. And have you got something you can show us that it would be like? Well, no, because you want it unique. And they're like, that is terrifying for someone. They could lose their job. If your stuff is terrible, and you just go, well, it's black. Don't you get it? It's just like a black square. And so you've got I often find I have to have empathy for them as a brand manager, etc. And I've done loads of work with brands. I find if they get out the way, just let you do your thing and go, we just want, I did this big work, Art of Cybersecurity for Trend Micro. That was like a huge success for them, and one of my favorite pieces of work I've ever made. It was a brand exercise, and they just let me do my thing. And I was showing them really weird stuff at the beginning, black and white, really weird things. And they were like, this is cool, so they have to come along with the journey. They have to be really good at what they do. And I really appreciate that. I guess the difference is when you move into the art world, so when you're working in the brand side, they can obviously pull it up through the process and they go, it's great. So with the EE work, it was all done, right? And everyone had checked it, great. And then the guy who was like the head honcho, He looked at the work and said, it's brilliant, but you can't use magenta because we used to be T-Mobile and we've not T-Mobile anymore. And nobody under him had spotted that. So I then had to redo all the work with no magenta, right? So when you're in the art world, no one can tell you jack shit. It's like, no, I don't care about the people that, you make the work and no one can tell you if it's rubbish or, it's not their business. It's like, here's my art. Bye. It's like, can you amend it? No, there's no amend conversation. And that's quite freeing as someone who makes creative work. You just make work, So, yeah, those are the differences for me. What was the second part of your question?
Second question was essentially you're talking about the guy that stabbed you in the heart, basically, guy, and the fact that you felt as though explaining your process kind of cheapened the process or cheapened it in the viewer's eyes, essentially.
Cheapened is. I guess that's why I get frustrated with things like art blocks. They're like, God, those people who are on that, forum on Discord and stuff. They're so geeky. And it's like, oh my God, it kills me. It's like they're talking about the geekiness of the work. They're not going, that's a beautiful piece of work. They're going, yeah, but if you look at the source code, it's like, it's like, oh God, shoot me in the head. It's like, I don't care. And it seems to be, I don't like the geek. I'm a geek, right? I'm a full-on geek. But I don't, when they're discussing art, why are you talking about the geekiness of it? I think they obsess about it.
Because I kind of look at things like, I'm very similar to you, Michael, in terms of I was building computers when I was like 15. And it's like going through the process of things, like I can appreciate more so how someone has achieved a result. And if that can increase my appreciation of the concept and of the execution. Do you know what I'm saying?
Fair enough. Yeah.
So I'll answer you then as a fellow sort of techno geek. I don't see these things as mutually exclusive. I actually see them for myself as mutually inclusive with all my work because it tries to be socially, contextually relevant to people, at the same time being beautiful and sort of technologically, artistically innovative. I think it can be all these things. For myself, I'm often trying to find the most simplest ways to explain the processes that I've used. Because often, if I'm sort of trying to frame a conversation around a particular thing that's happening in society, what I'm trying to do is not obfuscate. It's sort of like enlighten. It's to bring down the veils. So finding ways to come up and show as simply as I can what's going on with the work and why this matters. Some of the most brilliant minds that I've had the privilege to work with are at places like CERN, in Geneva. I mean, they're just like, I'd like to think that I'm well educated and an intelligent person. They are another sigma, or two beyond. And when I'm talking with these brilliant minds, they're able to distill things into very simple terms that even someone like myself that is not an astrophysicist or one of the top engineers in the world can understand. I think that's a beauty. And for me, I've always said that is my aim. I probably often don't reach that, but that's what I strive to do. Because if we're working in a technological space, for myself, I'm also working with the history of art practice. So, it's like how many millennia practice in the analog technologies, added to the complexities of today in the digital, the virtual, in today's society and the place within everything. That's a lot of stuff to cover. Making it simple is what I try to do, and I don't think that they need to be, exclusive. I think they can be inclusive. And one of, just to kind of as an endpoint, one of the things I often try to do with my shows or a particular work is for when people come in to see the work, they don't say, I could do that. They say, how did he do that? And then my job as the artist is to give that kind of like a little bit of light of, oh, this is how I did it. trying to raise people up to get people a better understanding about things. Yeah.
Thanks.
Well, I mean, I just wanted to, one sort of adjacent, but I think related question to yours would be, how is the Web3 marketplace impacting what artists are making? Because of this feedback loop of quick mint, quick sale. And it's really different than in other marketplaces for the arts. And that's something I think about a lot, because I do think there's a very subtle influence happening to all of us who are in that space. We'll put a lot of time, heart into a piece. We'll drop it, we'll get some result. Do something else, we get a different result. It's very hard not to start looking at the market dynamics a little bit in what we're doing. So,
Thank you, guys.
Hi. The world's eyes have focused down onto this size now, right? And that's where the viewer is just looking at their phones and it's gone off of the screen. And also the attention spans seem to have got shorter and shorter. People can't read books, they can't watch a movie full length, anything there. Has that changed the way you think about how you deliver the art you create for the audience?
I think a lot of stuff is like, it seems to be people, some artists are making giant art liking machine, like generators. You know, they're doing it to stuff that looks really good on Instagram. Is like, you know, it's you can make like a like generating like work. I think this is going to look really good on Instagram, where, you know, other work might not look as great because it's not as huge, or, you know, it doesn't have scale maybe, or so that can kind of, I don't think it, you know, should impact, because then you're thinking about it in the wrong way, I guess. It's like, how can I get the most eyeballs on this piece of work? So it's kind of like a bit manipulative, I guess, from an artist's point of view, to go, right, I'll do it like this because then I know that market is there. Yeah, people have, you know, I've shared work before where the first 6 frames of a moving piece is black. 6 frames, so it's less than a second, right? Practically no one looks at it because they've gone past, they just think it's black, a black thing, because they haven't even waited 6 frames. So then that does then inform you, right, I can't have a piece of black on a piece of work that I'm sharing on Instagram, because people just go straight past it. So there's those kind of things that probably maybe do influence, you know, your work subconsciously. But yeah, I think that's just the nature of culture generally, is if people, you know, there's not the attention spans, you know, people watch box sets and the whole, you know, one sitting and stuff like that. You know, there is like a big slow movement as well. So there are people like you were saying, Michael, the vinyl, you know, it's, you know, that's about ritual. You know, vinyl is huge in Japan. You know, I've just watched a film, A Century of Sound, and it's all about the listening cafes in Japan, and in particular Tokyo. All vinyl, people go in there and they just, you know, they're in this space and they relax and they listen to jazz or classical, whatever it is. But I think vinyl records is an interesting one, because I love that moment when you put the record on and the needle drops, and then there's this moment of like static, and, you know, that's a very human, beautiful thing. And I don't think it's because, you know, we're of a certain generation. I think there's something just very beautiful in that you don't get the same as like scrolling through, you know, a load of videos. But it's different for different audiences. You know, my niece is, you know, Gen Z, and she's like, you know, TikTok all day long, you know, but she does have a very actually informed view of the world. You know, she's amazing, because she's looking at different sources all the time. You know, she's not just looking at TikTok. She was talking to me about Roe versus Wade, and she pulled in like Google, and she was so informed about it. It wasn't just some cursory transient thing. So I do have actually hope that, that I think there is hope as well. I think it's easy to judge, that, oh, it's so much better in our day. But
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. What your question sort of raises in my mind is an experience that I had like some 20 years ago, where I was showing an installation in Dartington College of Arts as part of an academic creative sort of festival conference, and one of the keynotes was N. Catherine Hales, and she talked about intention spans and not them being different, but that the digital was shifting them, that it was distributing them. And I absolutely sort of, what she said is certainly come to pass. So I don't think it's really about, a regression of attention span, but it's just like a redistribution of things. To pick up on some of the things you were saying, Brendan, for me, I think that as an artist, we're trying to do something that is that the work is honest, and that if you are on the leading edge or working in sort of the leading edge of something of possibilities, that by definition you're not going to be mainstream. That's kind of the definition. So I look here and I see Harold's work, and was his work sort of, when he was making it, received well at the time? Yeah, no. It was a very small audience.
6 people.
Exactly. So it's like, I think we're all fortunate to be able to do what we do. And that for myself personally, I just don't worry about those things, that I'm trying to encapsulate the moment, of this time in the way that I see is important. And, in the end, the attention spans or the different kind of cultural things as they will ebb and flow, those will shift over time. And that it's for history to decide, and they'll be well past when us old men are, long gone.
I wonder, your question makes me want to know more about my collectors and viewers, how many are looking at their phones. And then it makes me think that it would be sort of short-sighted and sort of too limited by my own perspective to be judgmental about that. It almost makes me want to think about my work from that viewing perspective, that I'm not really. Right now, it's like, I hope they look at it not on their phone as well. But if most of them are viewing my work through their phone, maybe I need to adapt. That's sort of what it makes me feel like.
Well, thank you all for joining us this evening. We have works by Brendan, Michael, and Ira downstairs in the project space, which I would be happy to lead you down to view. But in the meantime, can we give a round of applause?